When we think of criminals, gangsters, shady characters, cheats, liars, and thieves, we instantly think of hoodlums or people on the other side of the law. But long before you and I were born, way back in the late 1800s, you never knew who had their hand in the cookie jar. This story is about a few men who were famous for many things, one being criminals, and another, well, you'll find out at the end of this little story. William Devery, well, that's how great-grandpa used to say his name anyways. He was a crook. Born in 1854 in New York City, he rose to prominence, but offering bribes and cheating hardworking people out of their rightful positions. Some said he was an illiterate thug, and some said he was a very likable person. Some wanted him dead, but nonetheless, he had the power and the money to do as he pleased when he pleased. And he did. Known in the streets as Big Bill, he was a bartender working the local tavern and making his connections. He was known to dabble in gambling and other low-risk crime for that era. After many years of hustling and getting his money together, he set out to start his career. In 1878, he went to Tammany Hall and bribed a local politician and was accepted on the police force. With no experience or training, he was working the streets almost immediately. It cost Big Bill $300 to get his rank as a policeman, but he would make that back in no time by accepting his own bribes from street criminals. By 1891, Big Bill had paid another $1,400 to advance to sergeant, then another $14,000 to advance to captain. 2 years later, Big Bill assumed command of the Red Light District's Eldridge Street Police Station. In his first speech to his men, he told them, and I quote, "If there's any grafting to be doing, I'll do it. Leave it to me." Grafting is political corruption, using the politician's power for personal gain, and in the late 1800s, almost everyone was abusing their powers. Big Bill had a plan. He knew he ran the Red Light District now. That was his personal area. Much like a gang claims territories to sell their drugs, police in the 1800s got their area by what station they ran. Big Bill wanted to segregate his Red Light District. His idea was to keep the whorehouses, the gambling dens, the drug pushers, and all illegal crime that he could in his area, so he could take their bribes. You know, the safer he kept them, the more money he could put into his personal pocket. Big Bill had it all planned out. He hired a personal tailor named Sam Meyer. He worked out of a shop in the district. If you wanted a favor from Big Bill, you would go down there with your suit and have it tailored. It would cost you $1,000 for a regular suit, and Big Bill would pick up the money at a later time, so it didn't seem too suspicious. This worked out well, as Devery was ranking in some big bucks, not to mention his many other illegal ventures he was investing and gaining big returns on. By 1894, his corruption was getting out of hand. People started noticing, and he was drawing the attention of the big boys at the Capitol. A state Senate investigation team summoned Big Bill to come on down to the courthouse and answer a few questions. Although Big Bill played no snitching card and blew off most of the questions with the "I don't remember," the committee didn't buy it, and Big Bill, facing a stack of evidence, was fired and indicted on charges of extortion. 1 year later, in 1895, the trial came down to the jury, who were most likely paid off pretty well considering the evidence was staggering, and Big Bill was acquitted and free to go on his way. A state Supreme Court ruling also overturned the firing, and he was back in power of his police force. The commissioners of police did not like this and tried to bring him old charges once again to get Big Bill fired. But Big Bill's money was too strong, and he obtained another Supreme Court ruling that stated the commissioners could not bring up any charges against William Devery, therefore there would be no new trials. In 1897, Tammany Hall, the same place Big Bill bought his way into the police force, had one of their own elected mayor of New York. His name was Robert A. Van Wyck. Van Wyck, a puppet of Tammany boss Richard Crocker, appointed Devery chief of police. The mayor praised Devery as the greatest police chief New York has ever had. and will continue to boost him over and over to make him out to be a stand-up, honest man. Which, of course, we all know he was not. All this quickly went to Big Bill's head, and he was noted saying many times that crime was at an all-time low since he's been chief, and there had only been 2 muggings and 1 safe cracking. He went on to say the safe cracking was an accident, and that the thieves later wrote him a letter apologizing for the mistake. Although many people, including people inside Tammany Hall, knew that crime was only being controlled and chartered by the police themselves, as graft and other bribery continued to plague the town and hurt small businesses by keeping the cheats and the crooks in business. In the year 1900, Big Bill teamed up with 2 men, one by the name of Frank Farrell, who was known as a gambler, a professional gambler in his own words, and State Senator Timothy Big Tim Sullivan. Together, the men would create a syndicate to handle protection services for gambling halls and establishments, trying to create a legal form of bribery with the "we will protect you if you guys give us a cut of your earnings." It wasn't long until the New York Times would expose the men on their scandalous activities, and soon the whole city would know about the scandal that was taking place. An article came out by Herbert Asbury in the Gangs of New York, claiming the team had earned over $3 million in their short-lived scheme. But the scheme was airtight, considering the syndicate united the police, the gambling venues, as well as Big Tim's hand in the legislature. In 1901, the New York State Legislature abolished Big Bill's role as a police chief. That means he was fired, and they created the job of police commissioner, who was head power over all stations. Now, not long after he lost his job, Mayor Van Wyck appointed Big Bill the job of, you guessed it, police commissioner, which gave him even more power than he had before. With that being said, William Devery was the last New York police chief, and he was the first New York police commissioner. One of the jobs of the commissioner was presiding the trials of police officers who had been caught cheating the job. Big Bill never once fined a police officer for breach of duty. The only time he would punish the officers is when they would get caught. It was perfectly fine to do anything you pleased as long as you were smart enough not to get caught. At one famous hearing, a police officer was drunk on the job. He went to trial, and they asked him to breathe into Big Bill's face. The officer refused, and Big Bill is quoted as saying, "That is right, my man. This case is dismissed. Keep your mouth shut all the time. If you do that, you won't get in trouble here." Easy things can go on forever, and soon Van Wyck was out of office, and in 1902, the new mayor promptly fired Big Bill. By then, Big Bill was a very, very, very rich man, with a mansion and a big real estate business in Rockaway. Devery was not done yet, though. He had more he wanted to do. Bigger things with more power. Big Bill decided to run for Democratic district leader in the 9th Assembly District. His good buddy in Tammany Hall had since been kicked out, and no one's seen him again. And a new leader was introduced, and he thought of Big Bill as a cheat and a disgrace to the business. So of course, the person who ran against Big Bill was backed by Tammany Hall. And Big Bill knew what he had to do. He had to buy the votes of the people to win the election. So he promptly planned a huge party. They say there was 18,000 people in attendance with food for all, bars and bands playing, music, fireworks, and pure fun, all for free. Instead of a speech, Big Bill just told everyone he would love if their husbands and brothers and families and mothers would all vote for him. He was a man who did things for the people, and he knew they didn't come to hear his speech, so he just let them all have fun. Not too long later, Big Bill threw another street party, this time on a vacant lot on 29th Street. He went through 20,000 glasses of beer, 1,700 pounds of roast beef, and 15,000 rolls. The chief said, "When I get to the Tammany Committee and the state convention, I'm going to make it hot for a lot of people. And my parting advice to you people is to take the other fellow's money. Take anything you can get. But remember, vote for Devery." On election day, Big Bill swept the polls and won in a landslide against Tammany Hall. They say Big Bill had more votes than there was people in the district. He marched through the streets with a big brass band playing the whole way and 5,000 people waiting on him to cheer. All for nothing. He was denied the victory, and he never got the service position based on fraud and corruption of the elections. Big Bill spent $60,000 to run on the slogan, "Have a drink on me." As you can imagine, Big Bill was not happy. He was rather irate. He claimed he was going to run for mayor, but that was also a failure. He spent $2 million once again with the same slogan and was beaten in the primaries. Devery said, "I spent my own money and I had some fun." He retired from politics and moved to Far Rockaway with Frank Farrell. Devery bought an American League Baseball franchise. They moved it to New York, named the team the Highlanders, and operated the team until 1912 when they sold it to Colonel Jacob Rupert and Tillinghast Houston, who renamed the franchise the New York Yankees.